Here are some boxing video title ideas that include Boxing Time. Yes, I've read the information you asked for on Cyril Ramaphosa. Here's a short summary for easy reference. #Shay. Who is Cyril Ramaphosa? Current President of South Africa since 2018. Leader of the African National Congress, ANC. Former anti-apartheid activist, trade union leader, and successful businessman. Key roles. Founded the National Union of Mine Workers, helped negotiate the end of apartheid, and helped draft South Africa's constitution. Became wealthy in business, Shanduka Group, before returning to politics. Presidency highlights. Promised to tackle corruption, fix the economy, and rebuild institutions. Faced issues like state capture fallout, COVID-19, load shedding, electricity crisis, and economic challenges. Controversy. Involved in the Fala Fala farm scandal, where large cash was reportedly stolen and allegedly not reported properly. He denies any wrongdoing. Let me know if you want more detail on any part, his presidency, scandals, family, or impact on South Africa. The Fala Fala controversy is a major political scandal involving South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. It centers around a large sum of foreign cash allegedly stolen from his Fala Fala game farm in Limpopo, and whether he acted improperly or illegally in handling the matter. Key facts of the Fala Fala controversy. When did it happen? The alleged theft occurred in February 2020, but was only publicly revealed in June 2022. What was allegedly stolen? Around $580,000 in cash, allegedly hidden in furniture like a sofa or mattress. The money was reportedly paid by a Sudanese businessman for buffalo on the farm. What's the issue? Ramaphosa didn't officially report the theft to the police. Instead, it's alleged he asked his head of security, Major General Wally Rood, to trace the thieves, possibly using state resources for a private matter. He was accused of trying to cover up the theft to avoid scrutiny. Legal and political implications. Possible violations. Failure to report a crime. Abuse of power. Using state security to investigate a personal issue, violation of currency laws, questions about why such a large amount of foreign currency was on the property, and whether it was declared to tax or customs authorities. Parliamentary Panel 2022, a Section 89 independent panel, led by former Chief Justice Sandile Nkobo, found that Ramaphosa may have a case to answer. The panel said there was prima facie evidence that he violated the Constitution. Impeachment process. In December 2022, Parliament voted not to proceed with impeachment. The ANC majority blocked it. Ramaphosa's response: admitted to the theft, but denied any wrongdoing or cover-up. Claimed the money was from a legal game sale and said he reported the incident to his head of security. Criticized the panel's findings as legally flawed. Current status. As of 2025, Ramaphosa remains president, though the scandal dented his image as a clean and reform-minded leader. Investigations by SA Reserve Bank, Public Protector, and South African Revenue Service, SARS, took place. The Reserve Bank later said there wasn't enough evidence of currency violations. still a point of political attack by opposition parties like the EFF and DA. Would you like a timeline or deeper detail on any part of the investigation?
Not for now.
F.W. de Klerk is my name. F.W. de Klerk is my name. I am retired. I'm no longer a politician.
De Klerk is a bedder. De Klerk has got blood on his head. De Klerk is a bedder. De Klerk has got blood on his head. De Klerk is a bedder. De Klerk has got blood on his head.
Let me put the record straight. It's a blatant lie to say I'm an unrepentant apologist of apartheid. Put the record straight. Let me put the record straight. It's a blatant lie to say I'm an unrepentant apologist of apartheid. I have made profound apologies for the pain that apartheid has caused. I've said on many occasions in South Africa and internationally, apartheid was wrong, was morally unjustified. So it's a lie. The EFF is a racist, fascist party. Mr. Malema is fashioning himself on Che Guevara. He's called the commander-in-chief of this party. And I'm ashamed of what happened in Parliament last night, not for my sake, but for the sake of the image of our Parliament.
Do you have any regrets about saying that apartheid was not a crime against humanity?
When I said that recently in an interview, I was in line with the Security Council of that time. I was in line with Great Britain, with America, with Sweden, with Norway.
But what do you think about apartheid personally?
Apartheid was wrong. I've profusely of that time.
Apartheid was not a crime against humanity.
When I said that recently in an interview, I was in line with the Security Council of that time. I was in line with Great Britain, with America, with Sweden, with Norway.
But what do you think about apartheid personally?
Apartheid was wrong. I've profusely apologized for it. I haven't only apologized. I and my team initiated the process which brought apartheid to an end. By the time when President Mandela became president, all the major apartheid laws have been scrapped from the law book by us, by a parliament in which the National Party had a majority. In that sense of the word, we started abolishing apartheid. We didn't only say sorry, we added the deed to the word and did something about it to rectify the wrongs of the past.
You were president of a racist regime. Are you yourself racist?
I was not president of a racist regime. I'm often referred to as the last apartheid president. I was the first white president who really abolished apartheid. My predecessor started by repealing 100 apartheid laws already. So we were bent on reform. From the early 80s, the National Party was doing its level best to work out a program of fundamental reform which would bring justice to all. What I did was conscience-driven. It wasn't because of sanctions. Yes, sanctions played a role, kept us on our toes. It wasn't because of the armed struggle. The ANC itself realized it could not win the armed struggle. It was conscience driven by me and my fellow leaders in the National Party admitting that apartheid was wrong and that therefore we have to make a 180-degree turn.
Was an admission just good enough? Why did it wait so long? Why did your government of the National Party wait so long to change laws and end all the suffering?
It was a process. We started already in the late 70s repealing many obnoxious apartheid laws. It was a process which was delayed by the fact that the USSR, when it still had an expansionist policy in Southern Africa, was supporting hundreds of thousands of Cuban troops in Southern Africa. All that delayed it. When the Berlin Wall came down, it opened a window of opportunity for me. I saw the window and we jumped through that window.
Some people say that you have blood on your hands. What do you think?
It's not true. I have a clear conscience. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission tried its very best to implicate me in atrocities, and yes, elements in the security forces did commit atrocities. I appointed 2 judicial commissions. The second one was successful in uncovering the very unacceptable role which elements in the security forces played during the years of the struggle and even thereafter, even after I became president. That resulted in me firing a lot and putting on early retirement a lot of very senior officials from the Defense Force.
Don't you think those people should have gone to prison for what they did?
We agreed on legislation which established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. There, anybody who committed serious crimes with a political motive could apply for amnesty. Those who applied for amnesty, if they made full disclosure, received amnesty from all sides. Those who did not apply were prone to prosecution, and the prosecuting authorities were free to prosecute anybody found guilty of serious crimes, of serious breaches of human rights, could have done so.
You obviously watch the news and you have been kept abreast with what has been happening in the country. This year was the 30th anniversary of your famous speech in which you had announced that President Mandela was going to be released. And now recently, President Ramaphosa said that the country does not have to thank you, Mr. de Klerk, for making that announcement that Mr. Mandela was going to be released and that the revolutionary parties were going to be unbanned. How did that make you feel?
I don't want the country to thank me, but I do want history to be correctly recorded. The ANC wants to rewrite history as if what happened in 1990 and from 1990 to 96 was just the result of their struggle. Yes, of course it played a role, their struggle. Yes, I give credit that they played a crucial role in that whole process. But we did as well. We also played a crucial role. It was my speech of the 2nd of February 1990 was an initiative. It wasn't negotiated. I didn't only release Mr. Mandela, I released all political prisoners. I unbanned all formerly banned organizations, even the armed wing of the ANC, without them suspending the armed struggle. That was an initiative when they did so. A few months after he was released, when Mr. Mandela announced it, they then took an initiative. So it was a joint effort. And true history should record that I and my side played an honorable role in that effort, that the ANC and under Mr. Mandela played an honorable role in that effort, and we shouldn't claim victory for any side.
Do you have any regrets about what you've just mentioned now? Or would you have done anything differently?
All the major decisions I took, with the advantage of hindsight, I would take again today. I would have made that speech as I made it and announced that package which removed any excuse the ANC could offer not to come to the negotiation table. I would call the referendum again to renew my mandate from the white electorate to negotiate a new dispensation. I would accept the constitutions we negotiated, the preliminary transitional constitution and thereafter the final one, notwithstanding that it wasn't perfect from my viewpoint. Yes, no regrets.
If you had not made those decisions, where do you think South Africa would be today?
I think if we clung to the old policies, South Africa might have looked like Syria today. I think the initiatives we took and the ANC took in coming together and in negotiating through a process of give and take, entering into good agreements, resulting in an admirable, very good constitution. If we didn't do all that, we might have looked like Syria, there would have been a civil war. We avoided a catastrophe by taking those initiatives.
Let's talk about the current state of South Africa. What are your thoughts on the current government?
I think we were on the right road in the first 15, 18 years after 1994 when President Mandela became president. We lost our way under President Zuma. We're on the wrong road now. I support whatever efforts President Ramaphosa is making to put us on the right road again, to revive our economy, to get it out of its lethargy. I support President Ramaphosa when he wants to act very strongly against corruption, and we have extensive corruption in South Africa. We've become a captured state by crook and criminal elements. So I'm supportive of the efforts which are being made, but I'm critical of the pace at which it is being done. And I think that we need to become much more realistic about the real economic challenges which we are facing.
What do you think your legacy will be? How would you like to be remembered?
It's not for me to write my own epitaph, but I would like to be remembered as somebody who made a positive, constructive difference at a crucial time in our history, and that I played a role in averting a catastrophe in South Africa.
Wow. That was very interesting. Very interesting.
So my name
His transition to the man who ended white rule.
Africa, F.W. de Klerk, a key figure in the country's transition to democracy, has died at the age of 85. Mr. de Klerk, who served as president for 5 years, ordered the release of Nelson Mandela from prison, a decision which led eventually to Mr. Mandela's election to the presidency. In a final message, recorded just before his death, Mr. de Klerk repeated an apology for the pain and hurt caused to black and minority South Africans during the Apartheid era. As our correspondent Andrew Harding tells us.
We did not only admit the wrongness of apartheid.
F.W. de Klerk was terminally ill when he recorded this farewell message, released today. A man still wrestling with his place in South Africa's tortured history.
I, without qualification, apologize for the pain and the hurt and the indignity and the damage that apartheid has done.
Back in the 1970s and 80s, South Africa was drifting towards all-out conflict. The security forces of a racist white minority government battling against an increasingly defiant black majority. When F.W. de Klerk came to power in 1989, no one expected this conservative figure to change much. After all, his government ran a nation where black people were treated as inferior, to be kept apart. But within months, de Klerk announced a shocking U-turn.
The prohibition of the African National Congress, the Pan-Africanist Congress, the South African Communist Party and a number of subsidiary organizations is being rescinded.
The ANC, the outlawed Liberation Party of Nelson Mandela, was unbanned, and soon after that, Mandela himself was released from prison after 27 years. Soon the two men, once bitter enemies, were sharing the Nobel Peace Prize as South Africa inched towards democracy.
What nobody can take away from him is his foresight. He seized the moment, he showed the courage, and he was the figure that eventually saw the end of apartheid, and Nelson Mandela elected as president in those heady days of the new rainbow democracy.
But the transition was not peaceful. Thousands of black South Africans died during political violence that was, it turned out, deliberately stirred up by white security forces. Still, de Klerk and Mandela kept negotiating, nudging their nation forward. Not that they were ever close.
So help me God.
And then, in 1994, history was made, as Mandela was sworn in as democratic South Africa's first president. De Klerk retreated backstage. Later, he apologized for his role in apartheid, but insisted he'd never authorized any criminal acts.
Within my knowledge and experience, they never included the authorization of assassination, murder, torture, rape, assault, or the like.
Many South Africans found that hard to swallow, and today there is a lukewarm tone to some tributes.
He had the courage to step away from the path that his party that he led had embarked upon from 1948, and we will remember him for that.
De Klerk was a divisive figure and an unlikely revolutionary, but history will record his key role in bringing freedom to South Africa. So, above all, Hugh, de Klerk was a pragmatist and a very necessary one. He latched on to this role as peacemaker, as elder statesman. But the truth is that South Africans never really warmed to him. That's partly because he always seemed to imply that apartheid was never really as bad as evil as people made out, and also because he failed to acknowledge his own responsibility in it.
Andrew, many thanks again. Andrew Harding there with the latest thoughts in Johannesburg.
Hey, it's Richard here.
In this
A few months ago on CNN, you made comments which were very badly received in South Africa because they were interpreted as being a partial defense of separate development, which was a foundational principle which underlied apartheid philosophy which you and your party supported for years. I would now like to give you the opportunity to clarify that, firstly, and secondly, knowing what you now know with the benefit of history on your side, how much do you personally regret joining a party like the NP?
Let me firstly thank you for the opportunity, but I don't need it, I've already rectified. And if you follow the follow-up of also a telephonic interview between me and Christian Amanpour, she also allowed me space to rectify. It was misinterpreted what I said. I was trying to say, when I was a young man of 21 and 25, why did I support separate development? And part of it was that I then believed it could bring justice to everybody in South Africa through the nation-state concept. I then believed, and this is what was misinterpreted, as everybody now believes that the two-state solution is the right one for Israel and Palestine, that the 9 or 10-state solution is the right solution for South Africa. Soon after I entered politics, and in my years as a backbencher already, I came to the realization it's not working. And Especially since the early 80s, I became convinced that where we stand is morally indefensible, and that apartheid was wrong, and that it couldn't be improved, it had to be abolished. And I played a leading role in abolishing it. With the benefit of history, I made a profound apology in front of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, apologizing for the pain and the indignity that apartheid has inflicted on all people of color in South Africa, saying it was wrong. So, with the advantage of hindsight, apartheid should not have existed. But let me add, and once again I don't want to be misunderstood as in the case with Christian Amanpour. We in South Africa did not invent apartheid. The colonial powers implemented policies which were equally unacceptable from a moral point of view as we talk today about what was morally right and wrong, as was done in terms of apartheid. All the colonial powers, Great Britain, the Spanish, the Germans in Southwest Africa, the Belgians in the Belgian Congo, all over. Africa was in a sense raped by the colonial powers. And what was left behind wasn't full-blown democracy. It was underdeveloped political systems or no proper political systems at all. Yes, some education was brought, etc., etc. So, this problem of racial discrimination is and was a worldwide problem. And therefore, it's not only in South Africa that self-examination and self-analysis must be done about what was wrong in the past. All the developed and former colonial powers should do the same inner searches of themselves.
On Good morning, welcome to the special TV1 newscast. White South Africans are flocking to the polls today in one of the country's most historic referendums, a referendum which will decide the future of South Africa. We have reports on the latest developments at some of the polling stations. Voting began briskly in Pretoria this morning. Queues formed at all the polling booths before voting began at 7 o'clock. There was a lively atmosphere at the school in Arcadia, where President F.W. de Klerk and his wife Marika brought out their votes. A smiling Mr. de Klerk told the Board of International Newsmen that he was optimistic about the result.
Is hij optimistisch? Ik is optimistisch. Ik denk dat dat goed kan. Je hebt wonderlijke enthousiasme in ons terugvoering dat de mensen vanaf stem, klinkstem en enthousiastisch.
In Nelstroom, where the leader of the Conservative Party, Dr. Andries Klerk, cast his vote, some people even brought their children along to witness the historic referendum. Dr. Klerk said he was confident of winning the ballot.
I feel very good. I'm prepared for any result, especially with the win.
Another member of the Conservative Alliance, Mr. Jaap Marais, was one of the first to cast his vote at the polling station at Rittendale in Pretoria.
Johannesburg suburb of Greenside, a long queue of voters waited for polling booths to open at 7 o'clock this morning. Waiting patiently in the queue was DP leader Zach de Beer, who was accompanied by his wife Mona. Under the glare of television and press cameras, Dr. De Beer presented his ID book for stamping and placed his vote before giving onlookers the thumbs up and leaving for a tour of the rest of the polling stations in his Parktown constituency.
In the Germiston voting region, it was mostly older people who visited the polling stations at the City Hall of Germiston and Elsburg. A few office workers from the surrounding business districts also joined the queue. Buses arrived from old-age homes in the East Rand, and senior citizens were helped up the stairs and into the voting halls before the expected rush at noon and later this afternoon.
In Bloemfontein, the rain has come with referendum day. Election officials I spoke to expect a high turnout, and the same story is being repeated in all centres in the Free State. Here at the City Hall, over 2,000 have cast their ballots. In Virginia, welcome, each over 1,000 in the past 2 hours. People who voted here in other elections say they've never seen such queues. But it's all going smoothly, a streamlined operation, and the voters resolute and quiet with no incidents. From a windy, cloudy and rain-threatening Bloemfontein, this is Conrad Berg.
Back a little bit to what you and Nelson Mandela wrought in the late 80s. You see that fantastic and famous picture of yourself and Nelson Mandela holding your hands aloft when you won your Nobel Peace Prize together. And yet, I don't think you're the closest of friends.
Actually, we're close friends, not the closest in the sense that we see each other once a week. Also, we live apart. But he's been in my home as a guest, I've been in his home as a guest. When I go to Johannesburg, my wife and I have had tea with him and Gracia, his wife. No, we call each other on birthdays. There is no animosity left between us. Historically, there was.
What was the historic animosity? For instance, you've been quoted as saying that you disagree with the hagiography that goes around Nelson Mandela these days, that you found him quite a difficult and tough negotiator.
The main cause for the tensions, when there were tensions between us, was the ongoing political violence. His accusations and personal attacks upon me, as if I were responsible for it, as if I were looking away and allowing it to happen, not recognizing the extensive efforts which I made to identify the culprits. So that was the main cause of the tension.
Do you remember the first time you met him?
I remember it very well. He was brought under cover of darkness to my office from the Victor Verster prison. We did not discuss that evening anything of fundamental importance. We were just feeling each other out. I've read, of course, everything I could read about him beforehand. I was well briefed. I was impressed, however, by how tall he was, by the ramrod straightness of his stature, and realized that this is a very special man. He had an aura around him. He still has an aura around him. He is truly a very dignified and a very admirable person.
He once said that he had to convince his colleagues to sit down with the enemy and suppress their feelings about you all.
That's true, as I had to convince some of my supporters in the same vein. But can I say that from the beginning in the negotiations, I realized that he was also a good listener, reaching out to the one speaking, trying to understand what lies behind what was being said. I felt it that first evening. And both of us later wrote in our respective autobiographies. After that very first meeting, we could report back to our constituencies. I think I can do business with this man.
After that very first meeting, and you described this man of dignity, did you have regret in your heart that he had been in jail for nigh on 28 years?
I felt he was in jail much too long.
Was it an injustice?
He was properly tried in front of a properly constituted court. He was represented by the best lawyers. And he was found guilty of what is a crime in the United States, of what is a crime in all developed countries, of treason. He planned, as a young man, to overthrow the government in a violent way. But life sentence in South Africa, that's how I felt when he was convicted as a young lawyer, when I was a young lawyer. But life sentence in South Africa at that stage meant that your release should be considered after about 20 or 21 years. I remember saying to him, the second time I met him, again he came to my office, it was 4 days before his release. And I said, Mr. Mandela, I want to tell you, you will be released on Sunday the 11th. And he said, it's too soon. And I said, why? He said, we need more time for preparation. And I said, Mr. Mandela, you've been in jail too long. You and I will negotiate about many things. But this is not negotiable. You will be released. Now let's negotiate about what time of the day and where do you want to be released. he was in jail too long. The efforts by my predecessor to release him on a conditional basis failed, and I have respect for Mandela's reasons for not saying I will renounce violence at the stage when he was asked to do so, for not saying I will accept going to live in the Transkei, which in our terms was an independent state. He wanted to be released unconditionally. And this is what we did.
He once called you a man of integrity, and then he took that back. He is still very regretful that you yourself have never renounced the principle of apartheid. And many, for instance, on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, those who led it, regret that you did not take or seek amnesty, that you didn't take responsibility for what your party did.
Well, let me firstly say, I'm not aware that Mr. Mandela says I've never renounced apartheid. I have made the most profound apology in front of the Truth Commission and on other occasions about the injustices which was wrought by apartheid. What I haven't apologized for is the original concept of seeking to bring justice to all South Africans through the concept of nation states. But in South Africa it failed. And by the end of the 70s we had to realize and accept and admit to ourselves that it had failed. And that is when fundamental reform started. But I have made a profound apology for the injustices caused by apartheid.
The ills of apartheid. Despite an unqualified apology for the ills of apartheid, many South Africans have mixed feelings about F.W. de Klerk. In the wake of his death, the F.W. de Klerk Foundation has released a pre-recorded video, his last message to the nation. He's credited with dismantling apartheid and bringing about reforms that included the release of political prisoners such as Nelson Mandela and the unbanning of political organizations like the ANC and the PAC. His speech at the opening of the 1990 session of Parliament marked the official end of segregation policies and the official start of the negotiations that led to a constitutional democracy. Now, Executive Director of the F.W. de Klerk Foundation, Dave Stewart, PAC President Mzwanele Nyonzo, and former anti-apartheid activist Father Michael Lefsley are joining us now live from the Mother City just to talk to us as we reflect on de Klerk's legacy. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Mr. Stewart, if I may start with you. By now, you've heard a number of reactions since yesterday's passing of Mr. de Klerk. What's your sense where the country is at in recognizing Mr. de Klerk? A number of reactions since yesterday's passing of Mr. de Klerk. What's your sense where the country is at in recognizing Mr. de Klerk's role in South Africa during apartheid and in the transition of democracy? Just to kick off this discussion, what's your sense today?
Well, my sense South Africa is divided on the legacy of F.W. de Klerk as it is divided on so many other questions. One may look at the situation from one's preferences or dislikes. The fact remained that F.W. de Klerk led the process that moved South Africa from apartheid to constitutional democracy. And it was a very difficult process. So you have the record, but as with all political figures, you're going to have widely differing views regarding the motives, the merits involved in the actions of the man.
Yeah, former President Kgalema Motlanthe telling my colleague Puleli Tutu-Jones earlier today in Pretoria that in his view, F.W. de Klerk stepped forward at a time when it was really difficult to facilitate that transition. I don't know whether or not Mr. Inyonzo, the PAC, would agree with that.
Definitely, I won't agree.
I want to agree with that. We don't share that sentiment. That de Klerk occupied a special place in South Africans' heart is not true. He occupies that special place in Kgalema Motlante's heart. He must not speak on behalf of South Africans. We have scars from de Klerk. De Klerk has got blood in his hands. He killed innocent kids in Umtata in 1995. He killed so many families. The Kalata families, Cradle 4, they want answers. De Klerk never came up. He never went to the Truth Commission and being interrogated for what he did. So many people were killed under his own watch. Even after the so-called unbanning of political parties, people were killed. 1993 was 3 years after the killing of after the opening of political parties. And yes, so we disagree.
So you still hold him responsible for that period of transition where we saw that violence you're mentioning in the early 90s and the emergence of the so-called third force?
Not only in that period, when he served in the government, when he was in cabinet in the 70s and the 80s, when he killed people in Hoi Patong, so many people were killed under de Klerk, and he never apologized. At some point, he even said...
But he has now, but he has recently apologized. He has issued an unqualified apology.
What is recently? Why the foundation had to wait until he died and then release a pre-recorded video? The apology, even in that circus that was called Truth Commission, people were interrogated. You had to tell them, what did you do? How did you do it? Why did you do it? And then they would consider to forgive you. He was never interrogated anyway. We opened the case against him. We wanted him to go to court and answer for his sins. Families that did never get closure. People died, just perished. Binzi Zaba was killed in Nana in KZN in 1991. And his throat was slit after being killed under de Klerk. Where did de Klerk ever go and apologize? Why the foundation waited until de Klerk died and then released the video?
Yeah, I'll allow Mr. Stewart to respond to that a little bit later on, but I need to bring in Father Michael Lapsley first. Mr. Stewart, I'll give you an opportunity to respond to why did you wait until now, a question that Mr. Nyonso is asking to release that apology video. Father Michael Lapsley, as far as I recall, thank you very much for joining us, you were a direct victim of a bomb that was sent to you in 1990, I think, in April or thereabouts, if my memory serves me well. You've had your chance. I saw a little bit of a clip from you talking to one of my colleagues at ENC yesterday, but we thought we should bring you in as part of this conversation as well today. 24 hours later, you reflecting on what we are just hearing now from Mr. Stewart and Mr. Nyonso, and with your experience way back in 1990, how do you feel about F.W. de Klerk's legacy currently?
Well, thank you. I want to firstly express my condolences to Dave, obviously a lifelong colleague of FW, as well as to his family and all people in the foundation. I think it is problematic to speak from the grave when there can be no rejoinder to that. In my case, as you said, I received the letter bomb in April of 1990, 3 months after the release of Nelson Mandela. When I gave evidence to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I said that I held FW politically and morally responsible for my bombing. The reason was that I was attempted assassination by a death squad within the machinery of the apartheid state, of which de Klerk was the president. Now, he says, I saw nothing, I knew nothing, I did nothing. Now, the late Mazel Slabber said to me, I went to FW, I spoke to him about the death squads, and FW chose to do nothing to disband those death squads, which is why I say he has political and moral responsibility for what happened to me. But also for my comrade from the PAC, it is in that period of receiving the Nobel Peace Prize that there was the killing of the children that he referred to in Umtata. And also, there's never been any reckoning. There's never been an account of the role that FW played as the head of the State Security Council, at which decisions were made. I don't know whether Dave himself was a member of that State Security Council, and which decisions were made to kill people, to kill activists, like the Craddock 4. So when I first heard about de Klerk's death, I immediately thought of Kanya, of the Craddock 4, and of other people who were still waiting for accountability. And the part, of course, that also raises the question, was there a deal between de Klerk and our democratic government on not going ahead with prosecutions, which should have gone ahead and were recommended by the TRC. And maybe Dave can tell us whether he was party to those behind-the-scenes deals that have meant there has been no accountability for the killings on the watch of FW. And of course, he makes an apology, but there's nothing, he's always ducked the question of the scale of killings, the scale of torture. He often spoke of bad apples. And of course, it's not long ago that he said it's not true that apartheid was a crime against humanity. And I believe Dave is the speechwriter, so presumably Dave wrote that speech in which the Klerk said that apartheid was not a crime against humanity.
There are a number of points, Dave, that Mr. Stewart, that have been put to you by Father Lapsley as well as Mr. Nyonso. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to cover. Of course, you started by saying we are divided.
There's one way in with all of this. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission had at its disposal all of the documentation from the State Security Council, from witnesses, from testimonies relating to illegal actions taken by the former government. They could find nothing, absolutely nothing to link FW de Klerk to any decision to perpetrate a crime against humanity or a violation of gross violation of human rights. So the Truth and Reconciliation Commission had all of that at its disposal, but it did not succeed in finding anything to
was there a deal? Was there a deal? Sorry, Mr. Stewart. Was there a deal?
Wait.
Don't worry, bro. Just one's in me.
I'll come to that. There was nothing that was found by the TRC to associate de Klerk with any kind of violation of gross violation of human rights. In fact, Archbishop Tutu's biographer, John Allen, wrote in his biography of Archbishop Tutu, called The Rabble Rouser for Peace, he said that the findings of the TRC relating to de Klerk were embarrassing in their paucity and their inability to link him to anything of this kind. So the TRC, with all of these resources at its disposal, could not find this because it did not exist. As for de Klerk's record, in terms of the security forces and the ghastly attack on Reverend anarcho-panelist here, it was nothing to do with what de Klerk was all about. One of the first things he did when he took over as president was to gather the officer corps of the police and the military in separate meetings, at which he told them, the struggle is over. Your job is now simply to defend the country and to maintain law and order. But there were elements within the security forces that were clearly acting against his orders and his instructions.
But he was the political head. But he was the political head.
Wait a second. There were elements on all sides that wanted to destroy the negotiation process. On the far right, they wanted to have violence, and they wanted to have mayhem and bloodshed. So they were working absolutely against de Klerk's policy of changing South Africa and beginning negotiations. Why should de Klerk, on the one hand, risk his political career to launch negotiations to unban the SACP and the PAC and the ANC to release Nelson Mandela if his objective at the same time is to carry on with an underhand war? It's just simply not true.
Okay, Mr. Stewart, we're going to just take a quick break. We'll continue this discussion. The point is somebody has to take accountability. He was the political head. He's the head of state. There's this big machinery that's been set up by the apartheid government, of which he was a head for quite some time. Yes, he's now wanting to embrace change and the transition, but people are still dying. That's what we're hearing now. But then it's a very interesting time that somebody who got the Nobel Peace Prize is still being viewed very, very, very suspiciously in terms of his intentions at the time. But we'll continue to talk about that. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Just stay connected. This is, of course, The Lead on ANC.
Honorable Malema, what is your point of order?
Honorable Speaker, we have a matter in the House where a man who got blood of innocent people in this House, which is supposed to represent the wills of our people. And therefore, it is incorrect for you to have extended an invitation to declare. Because declare is a murderer, declare has got blood on his hands, the people of Wipatum are taking in their graves, and declare said that crime was, apartheid was not crime against humanity. It's an unrepentant apologist of apartheid who is not willing to accept that apartheid was crime against humanity. And therefore, it is an insult to those who died and tortured in flag class under the instructions of Klerk to have declared sitting in a democratic parliament. And I therefore suggest, Honorable Speaker, that we please request Klerk to leave this House because it doesn't belong to this House. Sitting in a democratic parliament. And I therefore suggest, Honorable Speaker, that we please request Klerk to leave this House because it doesn't belong to this House.
Honorable Malema, have you finished?
So my submission, Speaker, is that please, for us to have peaceful proceedings, we should ask the commander of Flag Plus, the apartheid apologist, a man with blood on his hands, to leave this parliament because it does not belong here. That's my submission, Speaker.
Thank you, sir. Order, members. Honorable Malema, I wish to rule on the submission you have made. This sitting has been called for one item and one item only, to give the President the space to address the nation. It is convention that all the presidents, the former presidents who are still alive, are invited to the sitting. The former president, Klerk, has been invited because of that. I therefore cannot sustain the submission you have made and therefore rule it out of order.
Honorable Speaker.
Honorable
call for a special
Honorable Roy Shibambo, I have not recognized.
Will you please recognize me?
What are you stating on?
On a point of order,
What is your point of order?
Order is that the rules of joint sitting apply even when it's a state of national address. That is number one. You can't recognize the Klerk as a president of what? Who voted for him? Are you saying this parliament, a democratically elected parliament, must recognize a white-only president who was elected by a criminal system of apartheid?
Honorable Shibambo,
It cannot be correct.
Honorable Shibambo, yes, you are right. The joint rules apply to the city. Order. The joint rules apply to the city. Order. You are right. The rules apply. And the rules apply, and those rules have never been questioned. History of this country is there for everybody. We recognized that there was an apartheid system. We also recognized that there was a system that brought us all into this house. And therefore that submission, that point of order is not sustained. What are you standing on?
On a point of order.
What is your point of order?
You as a presiding officer have made a mistake by inviting Klerk. So Klerk must go. Like you've been making this mistake.
Take your seat. We have not been detained. Please take your seat, Honorable. Is there for everybody. We recognized that there was an apartheid system. We also recognize that was a system that brought us all into this house. And therefore that submission, that point of order is not sustained. What are you standing on?
On the point of order.
What is the point of order?
You as the presiding officer have made a mistake by inviting the Klerk. So the Klerk must go. Like you've been making
Please take your seat. We have not made any. Please take your seat, honorable member. We have not made any mistake. Take your seat.
Honorable Speaker, you are talking about history. What I'm telling you is not history.
Honorable member, I do not recognize you. Please take your seat.
Did not get interviewed last week.
Honorable member, I do not recognize you. Please take your seat.
Today I'm going to make a beat for NBA Youngboy. Okay?
Recognize you. Please take your seat.
Honorable Speaker, you are talking about history. What I'm telling you is not history.
Honorable member, I do not recognize you. Please take your seat.
Did not get interviewed last week.
Honorable member, I do not recognize you. Please take your seat. Honorable member, I do not recognize you. Please take your seat.
Did not get interviewed last week.
Honorable member, I do not recognize you. Please take your seat.
On a point of order, Speaker.
What is your point of order?
Speaker, you just said yourself that it was apartheid. Who presided over apartheid? Klerk. And just last week he said apartheid was not crime against humanity. So we were humans enough to be killed by apartheid system. And the person who presided over that system must come and sit here with us after killing our fathers, after killing our brothers and mothers. On a point of order, Speaker.
What is your point of order?
Speaker, you just said yourself that it was apartheid. Who presided over apartheid? Klerk. And just last week he said apartheid was not crime against humanity. So we were humans enough to be killed by apartheid system. And the person who presided over that system must come and sit here with us after killing our fathers, after killing our brothers and mothers.
Please take your seat.
No.
You are taking your seat.
On a point of order, Speaker.
Honorable members, are we going to go on and on and on the matter of the presence of former President Klerk? May I then tell this House, Speaker, that the presence of former President Klerk in this House is proper because we have done it in terms of the rules. We have always been open about the former presidents and former leaders of this House, and therefore delaying the business of this House tonight on the matter of former President Klerk is not going to help us. So may I suggest that I will not make any further points of orders on this matter. Honorable, if you address me, you address me on a different point, not on the matter of former President Klerk.
Speaker, you have a constitutional obligation to respect the rules. You do not make them as you go. There is no such a rule that you are anticipating what I'm going to stand on and rule it in anticipation. That's number one. You are a commander of Controversies. You ANC members sitting here. You told us you said we must reconcile with these people because they accept the mistakes that they have made. That is history. That's okay. We're not talking about history. We're talking about last week. The Klerk platform in front of the whole world and says apartheid was not a crime against humanity. You must be ashamed you are sitting here clapping hands as ANC people. You must be ashamed. No one is even raising us. Speaker, no one is even raising a substantial argument in
in relation to what we are raising. You are busy clapping hands. Honorable Ndozi, de Klerk is an apartheid. Honorable Ndozi, not in 1994. My rulings yesterday, your seat.
I am very, very clear and simple. If you are standing up on any point, it is not on the point of the Honorable, the former President of this country. I am not going to go on and on the matter of former President Klerk.
Speaker, I'm willing to accept that the ANC is defending de Klerk in this house. And South Africans should see the ANC for what it is. It defended de Klerk, they are clapping hands for de Klerk, in defense of a murderer. De Klerk remains a murderer.
Honorable members, please do not stand before you are recognized. Honorable Murder, you are recognized.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we are not going to have a debate on the past tonight. But,
Order! Honorable members of the EFF. Order! Honorable members of the EFF, you will respect anybody who is on the floor of this house.
Honorable Speaker, I know
you will respect any speaker who is on the floor of this house. Because when you stood, people allowed you to say your piece. Honorable Murder, please continue.
Honorable Speaker, we should just be technically and legally and constitutionally correct and should deal with the real facts. What the honorable members of the EFF don't know, it seems, is that in 1994 there was an election where all South Africans participated, all South Africans, and in that election, President Klerk was elected one of the deputy presidents of South Africa. And he served.
You are protected, Honorable Murder.
He served as a member of parliament after 1994 as a deputy president of South Africa. So the president that you have said is the correct one, and I suggest that we proceed with the business of the House.
The Honorable Buthelezi.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chairperson of the National House of Provinces, Your Excellency, our President, honorable members, I was wondering, Honorable Speaker, whether we can have our say, and the only way you can have our say is to put the matter to the vote, so that all of us can have a say on the matter.
Then we can all have a say in the matter. We all want to have a say in the matter. Speaker, I want to second the motion that we vote on de Klerk. Let's vote and see who's going to vote for de Klerk to sit in this house. What to do? We know who are the spies. The spies are going to get vote on de Klerk. Let's vote and see who's going to vote.
So that all of us can have a say. I was wondering, Honorable Speaker, whether we can have our say, and the only way you can have our say is to put the matter to the vote, so that all of us can have a say on the matter.
Then we can all have a say in the matter. Put to the vote,
so that all of us can have a say on the matter.
Then we can all have a say in the matter. To the vote,
so that all of us can have a say on the matter.
Look at his face, Melima. That's you.
Then we can all have a say in the matter. To the vote,
so that all of us can have a say on the matter.
Then we can all have a say in the matter. We all want to have a say in the matter. Speaker, I want to second the motion that we vote on de Klerk. Let's vote and see who's going to vote for de Klerk to sit in this house. What to do? Oh no, what the spies? The spies are going to get voted. Let's vote on de Klerk. Let's vote and see who's going to vote for de Klerk to sit in this house. What to do? Oh no, what the spies? The spies are going to get voted. Let's vote.
For more, go to EW.
Brilliant.
Create a voice.
Special panel charged with establishing whether South African President Cyril Ramaphosa should face impeachment.
Allegedly covering up a crime, submitted its findings to Parliament on Wednesday.
Questions. Dragging the President before an impeachment process is a huge decision. It cannot be done on flimsy grounds. There has to be something tangible that you can hold on to before you take that decision.
Ramaphosa was accused by South Africa's former spy chief of covering up a robbery of millions of dollars at one of his properties. Parliament will debate the report next week.
When we announced that today we'll be receiving this report from the panel, independent panel, we then also announced that on the 6th, by the way, even there was consultation with all political parties, and it was agreed to that on the 6th, which is next week Tuesday, this report will be tabled before the Assembly.
The debate could lead to a potential vote to remove the president who's denied the accusations against him. A two-thirds majority would be needed to impeach him.
I will go through the report as the office of the chief whip and call caucus to brief caucus what is the content of the report. At the moment, we'll be shooting from the dark because we don't know what the report is all about.
The report's filing comes only 2 weeks before the African National Congress, which has been in power since the end of apartheid, convenes to elect a new leader.
All right, let's start this broadcast with this story that is in fact coming from South Africa, where Cyril Ramaphosa's Farmgate scandal has rocked the South African politics, and the South African president, according to reports, made a fortune by selling buffaloes. He'd once bid more than 20 million rands on a single buffalo. And that's not all. Ramaphosa, it appears, has a serious liking for buffaloes as well. Made a fortune by buffaloes. He'd once bet more than 20 million rands on a single buffalo. And that's not all. Ramaphosa, it appears, has a serious liking for buffaloes as well. And he keeps scores of them in his farm as a part of his business. He also imports them from nearby stations, invests in breeding and nurturing them. The Ramaphosa is now embroiled in a cash and cushion scandal. It's also been described as a farm's gain. He is alleged to have covered a theft of more than $4 million from his Fala farm. The Ramaphosa has been accused of trying to hide the existence of this huge sum of undeclared currency, and according to the president, the money that was stolen was in fact made by selling buffaloes. Ramaphosa had earlier said that he had received.
So how do you become a member at Foundry? Well, to start with, you'd go through our 21-day challenge, which gives you an opportunity.
Ramaphosa had earlier said that he had received a sum of $600,000 in terms of cash for the buffaloes that he had sold. And a total of 13 such buffaloes were in fact reportedly stolen from his farm. Apparently all the cash that he received from selling the buffaloes was stolen from beneath the sofa's cushion, where he had kept the cash himself at his ranch. The South African president now wants everyone to believe the story, and according to Ramaphosa's lawyer, the South African president will challenge Section 89 of the Panel Report, which has declined to believe his account of the Fala break-in case, where robbers had in fact come and they stole the cash. But what is interesting is that the president, who had cash stolen from his farm, did not report it to the police. South Africa's ruling African National Congress will also hold a meeting of its National Executive Committee later in the day today, which will be attended by the South African president himself. And this comes the day after the party's National Working Committee held a meeting in Johannesburg, and the members met to discuss the experts' panel report on Ramaphosa, which found that the president may have violated the oath of his office. The president did not attend the meeting on Sunday, saying that it was in fact up to the National Executive to now decide his future. If the ANC decides to adopt the panel's report, then the Committee of Lawmakers will be constituted to reassess the case against the president.
and its findings will then be put forward to the National Assembly, which would vote on how to proceed from here. Impeaching the president will of course require the backing of 2/3 of a majority in the House, and it remains to be seen as to which way the ANC will of course swing on the back of these allegations of serious fraud that have now been leveled against the sitting president of South Africa. Alright, now to give us more insights in terms of what of course is likely to happen in South African politics, we're being joined by Edwin Naidu, who is a political commentator and is joining us live from Cape Town in South Africa. Now, Mr. Naidu, this of course is a very serious case that has rocked South African politics. It's been described as the Farmgate scandal that the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is embroiled in. And a decision given to the start is expected to be taken by his party today. Give us a sense of how his party so far has viewed this case. How much internal support does Cyril Ramaphosa have within his party after these allegations have been made public?
Well, good day, Mohammed. Thanks for that. I think, it was expected that President Ramaphosa would step down on Thursday. In fact, the rumors were very high that he was going to resign. He was, going to pack it in. There was no appetite to fight. But what you saw on Thursday was major intervention by people like the National Chairperson, Wede Matashe, Minister of Justice Ronald Lamona, and others who reminded him that the ANC nominated him for the position of president, and he could not stand down without consultation with the National Executive Committee. So I think, remember that Ramaphosa is super wealthy. Unlike his predecessor, Jacob Zuma, who has multiple wives, 20 children, he's always broke and needed to keep his hands on the financial levers. But, with Ramaphosa saying that he was going to go with the news spreading, there was huge implications, rapid decline of the currency, with South Africa struggling economically, after the pandemic, you found that there could be another economic crisis. I would say that the party rallied together and spoke to Ramaphosa and said, you can't leave now, before the major elections take place in 2 weeks' time for new leadership. They didn't want him to hand over party, so it was to stay on, and that convinced him and made him change his mind.
All right, very interesting. Now, it remains to be seen as to what decision will, of course, be taken by the ANC in terms of how it wants to proceed with this case. But the question that I want to ask you, Mr. Naidu, is, going into these elections which are pretty imminent in South Africa, is Cyril Ramaphosa going to be a liability or a big political asset for the ANC?
Well, I think, it's lesser of the two evils or lesser of the few evils that you have. You've got him running up against Zweli Mkhize, who himself faced major scandals as health minister, amounting to hundreds of millions of rands, and responded and siphoned to his family, son, wife, and daughter-in-law. So that's his main rival. His other rival is the the current minister of cooperative government, Dlamini Zuma, the former wife of President Zuma, former President Zuma. And she herself, when she was a minister many years ago, I think it was asked, she gave money to a movie that embroiled her in scandal. So each leader is tainted with something. But many people seem to think that Ramaphosa, because he's loved by business, in fact, we've got his critics who say he's aligned to white monopoly capital, white business, and people they support him because he's very sort of amiable to them. But I think, what this Pala scandal showed is that he actually didn't say much, he didn't do anything. It was just rumors, and the rumors actually made him stronger because when people thought he was going to resign, there was a huge groundswell of support saying, don't resign. But you also had some people who say he must go now because what he did is wrong. And the fact is, when you compare him to the previous president, two wrongs don't make a right. But the fact is, how wrong is he? He's wrong compared to Jacob Zuma's wrong.
That's a question that the people in South Africa will decide. But just before we let you go very quickly, the fact that Cyril Ramaphosa came into the presidency campaign when he was campaigning, he said that he wanted to clean up the South African politics of corruption. But looking at the allegations that have now been leveled against him, do you think he's failed on that front?
I think he definitely has failed because he's breached trust, and I think when you breach trust, you can't convince people to do something when you yourself are tainted. But in his favor, he's definitely gone the extra mile to try and reverse what we call state capture. The former previous president aligning with the Gupta brothers from India who are now hiding in Dubai. He's tried to make sure that people involved in those, investigations are brought to justice. It hasn't really happened, but I think this has made him stronger in a sense. And remember the last time he fought this election, it was very close. He beat Dlamini Zuma by just something like 200 votes. So, given that he may still have the strong support of people who are saying, let's, look at this report, according to its merits, he will take it to the Constitutional Court and review. It might make him stronger, he might emerge because they see him as the best bet for South Africa, given that our leadership integrity is there,
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Naidu, for joining us and getting us all those insights there.
Sure, sir.
Beyond is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.
7,000 miles from South Africa's seat of power, and home to a man who's been...
It's politics. We've been invited to the home of Hazem Mustafa, the Sunnese businessman who has found himself at the heart of what is now known as Farmgate, the political scandal that could see South Africa's president face impeachment proceedings. An independent inquiry recently found that Cyril Ramaphosa may have violated the Constitution after a political rival filed charges of corruption and money laundering. The allegations exposed a secret theft of a large stash of foreign currency from his game farm nearly 3 years ago. Ramaphosa says this man is the source of the cash stashed in the couch. Hazem confirms that he paid $580,000 in cash to buy 20 buffalo from Pala Pala farm. It says because of COVID, they were never exported. And now he and his South African wife are making headlines.
I'm not sure why we put it there. Why didn't send it to the bank? It's also questions there.
On the 23rd of December 2019, Hazem lands in Johannesburg with $600,000 in cash. 2 days later, on Christmas Day, he drives to Pala Pala farm. He hands over $580,000 for 20 buffalo, then leaves South Africa the next day as Ramaphosa arrives at the farm. Ramaphosa tells staff to deposit the cash, but after he leaves, it's transferred from the safe to the cushions of a couch. According to Ramaphosa, this money was stolen, so the money is no longer there.
Once I gave the money, the ownership of the money has been transferred from me to him. And the receipt is my evidence for the payment. It's by law or by logic sense.
None of this was public knowledge until June of this year. At this point, were you aware that the president was involved in the buffalo sale?
From when I hear the news, this is the first time to really know that he's the owner. Because if you saw the structure for the farm, it's belonged to trustee. And this trustee, I think, belonged to his family. There's a copy of the declaration.
Hazem is now cooperating with the South African authorities and says he's handed over his evidence. He shows us the documents, but won't let us film them. So this is a declaration form. Hazem Mustafa Mohammed Ibrahim, OR Tambo International, arrivals A. It's got your date of birth. It's got the time, 23rd of December 2019. You arrived at 5:07 p.m. And you declared $600,000 US. The Farmgate scandal has fractured Ramaphosa's anti-corruption platform and raises questions around his credibility at a critical moment for his party. South Africa's parliament will soon decide whether Ramaphosa will face impeachment proceedings. And as for the man who bought the buffalo, he's ready to take the stand.
Anything to help the justice and to show the truth, I'm here. I have nothing to hide.
Back in the safe and not in the couch. Yusra Babir, Sky News, Dubai.